Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining. We're going to be getting a talk by Stanislav today, who is a senior game design director at EA. And I was wondering how is he at EA and also at Supercell, but I realized you've been at EA and then at Supercell and now back at EA. So a key
Exactly.
figure behind SimCity Build It, from shaping economies at EA to have driving double-digit revenue growth at Heyday at Supercell. He knows what actually moves the needle. And with that, Stanislav, over to you.
Hello. Thank you for this introduction, and uh, thank you for inviting me to give this talk. Quickly and listening to some previous talks, I realized that although kind of I'm very involved and very interested in applications of AI and the developments there, I can't really give a technical talk, or I'm not at the level to give that kind of technical talk. But I was thinking to explore a little bit of paradox that we are having, because AI, in my opinion, is a new tool in our arsenal, and it's already quite useful. I will be focusing on generative AI, but in general, all types of AI are already quite useful. But what we are seeing is a pretty uneven way of adapting it at the moment in various studios. And I don't think that it's a technical reason, because tools are here, but we still face certain level of hesitation. And I promise this is not going to be like the usual rant about like artists are afraid and games are hostile and legal doesn't know how to define the copyright. But I want to dig a bit deeper into kind of some problems that I've detected in talking with various people with studios that are still struggling to adapt this new technology. So this is kind of like why I wanna start dig deeper, and then maybe have a conversation with you people and see how are you encountering the same situations, and how are you dealing with it in that case. As I said, the definition, I don't think it's a technical problem per se, because technology is already there, but maybe more about the expectations, familiarity, and also the way how the technology is presented at this point, like the learning curves and user experience if you're trying to use this technology and that sort of stuff. So I've seen that kind of there are maybe four stages is in acceptance of AI, and everybody in the world is kind of somewhere on these stages. So first, of course, is total dismissal of generative AI as technology, which we are facing by some people. Then accepting in principle, but having trouble of conceptualizing and understanding the possibilities and probabilities. Then there's curiosity of having AI integrated, but having actual trouble of integrating it in AI in workflows. And I would say the studio that I'm working in is currently still at this stage. And then finally, fourth would be that there's no kind of that you are finally having a healthy way of accepting this new tool in the arsenal of what you have in your production process as a video game studio. So that would be what I think. And if you're thinking and try to unpack these kind of hurdles, I think that the first or total dismissal comes from how we perceive and define art in itself. And in general, we have kind of two very distinct yet blurred definitions of art. So, on one hand, art can be art in the high sense, like in the academic sense, art where art is defined by insight and vision. That would be on the left side. This is the stuff that would be academic art, or something that you would see in a museum, in an art gallery. And then the second thing is more of a craft, more of a art as a creative output of visual and audio and even narrative elements in various media, and video games being one of the media. And that would be everything that we see on the left side, like the poster for the movie, all the VFX from the movie, everything that we see there that was created by what we called artists. This is applied art in a way. And those two definitions can be sometimes blurred very much, and where the authorship lies is kind of like a big question or philosophical question in these concepts. But when we kind of go to more tangible things, if we think about quite a lot of what we call art, or we call art assets in games, are actually art production artifacts. So 300 various icons or swords or bottles of magic potions in an RPG game are not really art. They require craft, they require understanding of art, they require creation, but they don't really embody this. It is something that's necessary for the game to be an expression of the art, but true artistry arguably lies in the overall art direction of the game. So really, I don't care who created the individual icons that I encounter in the game, but I actually care about the overall visual appeal of the whole product. So this is kind of good to understand. And this in this category of artifacts, we can find everything, like from generic textures to simple props to UI icons to scenography fillers like bushes, trees, and so on. And this is something very important. And usually the Gen AI where it excels is actually creating this based on the high level input. The second thing that people tend to confuse is the technique versus artistry. And this is kind of even more profound and more typical thing. So people think that uh, art or art identity equals mastery of particular art technique, which is again a philosophical concept and kind of explored in art theory. We know that this is not really true. So you could have an example of like Duchamp's example here, classical, which has nothing to do with art technique, but he has everything to do with the message and intent. And on the opposite hand, you have the supermarket art, somebody that obviously has some artistic skills, some aesthetic skills, and some kind of a way of reproducing reality or imagination in particular media, but doesn't really have uh, the insight or intent to create an artistic piece. So this is something that you would buy in a supermarket and hang as a simple decoration, but not really kind of as an artist element. And what AI does, it actually threatens this technique-based identity, because it kind of it doesn't challenge creativity or vision. It changes the control over the execution or removes the need, or to a great part, of mastery of certain techniques. And this is kind of a very profound thing, and people kind of tend to blur that. Just me being able to use a paintbrush doesn't really make me an artist, even if the thing is aesthetics. And then also, just by using a particular tool doesn't mean that I'm not creating. That's also true in my opinion. This also leads to something more profound, and we are moving now to the distinction between the categories of those roadblocks that we are talking about. And this is the control anxiety, because in more traditional media, and by traditional here I mean also the old school 3D or also digital arts, artist controls actually every pixel or vertex or the brushstroke. So there is this absolute control, while in AI, artist is less of an individual contributor to the studio and more sort of an art director. So AI puts you in the vision, puts the emphasis on vision over the execution, and puts an emphasis on constraints over the micromanagement of placement of visual elements, and puts a focus on a feedback loop over direct control of the output. And this is really profound change. It really kind of moves you away from the seat of somebody actually moving the cursor to somebody dictating how the final outcome should look like. Really kind of moving you from individual artist to more to an art director territory. And not everybody is comfortable with that distinction. But even when you make it through those two first levels of conceptual problems with art, we come there when we talk about this control, and we come there to another paradox, another interface. So artists are used to having a great deal of control over the output. AI moves that further away from the artist, but still gives quite a lot of control over it by technology that we are having right now and we are building. However, that's still in very unfamiliar forms. It's a new paradigm shift, totally unfamiliar
I
for
gotta
a
hop
lot of...
onto a call.
Hello? Hello?
Sorry, please continue. I think that was just someone's mic not muted. Apologies for that.
Okay. Sorry, I got confused. I thought it was for me. So what
Mm.
we have here is unfamiliar methods of controls. Like we have a whole slew of new concepts like control nets, LoRa's, conditionings, pipelines, etc. And since this technology is still brand new, we still haven't kind of formed a common vocabulary, or we are forming it, but it's still not as familiar as the previous. So I would say that the generative AI is somewhere where the 3D art was back in the 90s and early 2000s. So we don't yet have right paradigms for UI that we would kind of want. And we have kind of two broken extremes. And I really love Confi UI. So very powerful tools that are very flexible and but very technical in a way, where they require a lot of understanding of the technology itself. And that leads to hostile user experience, which not all artists are ready to learn or don't have the time to learn and use. And then we have platforms that are focused on hiding that from the artist. They're much more friendlier, but they impose much harder limits and therefore shallower levels of control or more awkward levels of control. Like Midjourney would be that, or a lot of other platforms that exist there. So we don't have the exact level that we would expect. Gap is getting bridged every moment as we approach, but this is still evident at the place. Then we have the platform confusion, just by definition. So we have the which is another layer of confusion that adds to the artists. So we have model families, which are the essential differences, like let's say like Stable Diffusion, Flux family, and Nano Banana, and Midjourney, and several others, of course. But then we also have platforms that repackage those models and model families and combine them in various ways and provide the interface to them. And then the distinction is even blurred because some of them combine proprietary models built on the some of the families and combine them with the thing. So it's hard for artists now to know upfront what to expect out of the tool, because these tools still act quite different, and they are getting confused. Like, is the layer AI or Leonardo fundamentally different than Nano Banana, and that all sorts of stuff. This is gradually getting cleared out as the technology matured, but this is where we are at the moment. So there's still quite a lot of confusion and misunderstanding. And then finally, when you accept all this, there's the troubles of integrating it in your production workflows. And basically, it's a new technology, so there's a learning curve to it, and it's quite a steep learning curve at the moment in many ways. And that requires exploration, iteration, trial and error, and whatnot. While studios, of course, demand return on investment and predictability and certainty and and robustness and that sort of thing. But here we fall into a certain special trap, because now most of studios, when they hire, let's say, 3D artists, they can count on that everybody has worked, let's say, with Blender, because it's free tool and you can experiment with it and you can learn and you can hone your art. So there's pre-knowledge there. But with the AI tools, quite a lot of them try to monetize already now for the full package, because the technology is expensive simply to run. And then they hide the most powerful and most sophisticated tools behind the paywall. And then artists don't even know what they can do with the tools, let alone master them. And that leads in having a hard way to being it very hard to justify the cost before you kind of master it. And this requires actually quite a lot of hours of practicing, which is not really encaptured in free trials and so on. And especially free trials are kind of abstracting away the or hiding the most powerful features of the platform, which is a case at the moment. So this is kind of the last step that kind of creates a problem. So what actually needs to change is tackling some of these things. So not necessarily better model or better prompts, but better literacy, clearer ownership, and time to learn for players, for artists. because what I really think that AI is the tool that creation will remain human, no matter what, but AI separates more clearly vision from the execution, which is kind of an important thing, and allows us to explore our vision much faster than we would differently. And it will kind of redefine the art creation process fundamentally, and it's actually redefining it as we speak now. So we need to adapt to that. So this is basically what I kind of concluded, and I'm really interested to hear what are other people's experience with facing these sort of problems.
Thank you so much, Stanislav. I'm going to request that you stop sharing screen, and I'm also going to request everyone turn on their cameras for a few seconds so that we can capture a picture. And then we're going to open this up for discussion. So whenever we're ready. Um, Three, two, and one. I'm going to take. Thank you. Okay. Um, let's open this up for discussions or Q&A. Any disagreements with I love strong disagreements. So, any disagreements with Stanislav to begin with?
I thought, Stanislaw, you set it up, really well. I guess because it's exactly what I see, both in my own studio and in other studios where there is just like I encourage my art team and even my engineering team to use these tools. And there's all kinds of fear and trepidation, and then I really like the end where you talked about some of the issues of the real powerful tools being behind the paywall. So I don't know that it's an interesting disagreement that I have with you, other than you framed it really well and made it thoughtful for me to keep pushing to encourage the team to use these tools, because it's a positive. Like the fear of it being a negative or taking their job, to me, is misplaced when I see it more of a enhancement to their job. And one last thing I'll say, because I love how you framed it so much, I'm wondering if your slides might be published so that I can show them to my team, and it might help mentally get them moving along.
Absolutely, I can just contact me on LinkedIn and I can share them with you. That's the. I don't know if this has the.
We can publish this. So with
Yeah.
your permission, we'll be publishing this to LinkedIn.
Sure. Yes.
Okay. Everyone else disagrees.
I can speak to the
No.
marketing side. I work for a small marketing agency that services the games industry, and what we're seeing is a lot of hesitation. In fact, like, we use AI heavily for our strategy, but we've almost completely avoided using generative AI imagery. We've only had one client who really that's what they wanted, because they are developing a game that uses AI for all of the text. It's like procedurally generated. But aside from that, people generally they've asked us, like, are you using AI, Gen AI? No, good, for images. So there's definitely a bias, is what we're seeing.
I'm going to jump in with a question too. Do we see any difference between how the smaller studios are using this as opposed to the much, or perhaps the largest ones, given your lens, Stanislav, and the group here? So who does how do formats and norms, like you said, tools are evolving, etc. We need a common language. Where does that generally come from? Does it come from the bigger companies, or is that a strategic advantage everyone's hoping to keep? Yeah, just sort of wanted to see that discussion.
I mean, you kind of set me up. Like that's my every day I log into LinkedIn hoping that the anti-AI sentiment is remains strong, because I regard it as a competitive advantage. So I'm delighted to see it. But yeah, in my experience, it's the smaller studios who are just all in. And why wouldn't you be, right? Like, it's faster, cheaper, better quality. Like, so for a smaller studio, it's absolutely, I've seen the pickup be vastly larger. But with a larger company, for example, Electronic Arts, Stanislav is there. What is their motivation to change? When you've got a very successful, profitable business that's throwing off hundreds of millions of dollars in cash and IP, then you quite rightly are going to be very hesitant to mess with that production chain and mess with that audience. So I kind of respect that a lot. So yeah, that's my experience, but I'm curious what other people have to say.
So at least in the case of Electronic Arts, we tend to see it as a force multiplier, and we would like to see it as enabling us to do simply more with the same amount of people, and just simply giving greater output. I think that some of the inertia comes naturally from inertia of big organizations. So just going through the chain of command requires time, because we are a very, very, very nimble aircraft carrier. So it takes time to do any change, and that's kind of not really anything to do with AI. Second thing, there's, of course, this is going to be solved. But it takes some time, which is kind of the potential legal issues around things, and then it's still justifying the cost of applying it, because getting few licenses for a relatively small studio is one thing, but getting something at bulk and negotiating something at bulk for a huge company requires also time and approach, and then requires kind of strategically time, because we wouldn't like to switch from the technology provider to another overnight, because that kind of again requires the whole chain of command. So there is that aspect to it. I didn't include that in this presentation necessarily, because this is not really related to AI itself as a technology, but to any new technology that comes on market, independent of whether it's creative or not. And that is solvable problem. It's going to get solved eventually. It's a matter of operations, logistics, finances, and legal team, and that they have their own philosophy in life.
Are there parallels between? I really liked how you said that AI is today where 3D art was in the 90s. How did things evolve then? Because what I also heard was that, you know, common processes or common language and all of that stuff, just in terms of knowledge, has to evolve. Not just knowledge, but how we're labeling knowledge also has to evolve. So you guys would know this much better. Like, what are the common patterns you see repeating or perhaps breaking up?
Well, I personally see parallels on the level how technology. If you really want to use the bleeding edge of technology now in AI, it's going to be buggy, and it's going to be not robust, and it's going to require you playing with Python and exotic tools and chains, and that is going to really produce the awesome results. But it's going to be really tricky to have it robust and stable enough to organize the production pipeline around it. So the tech that you can talk about is kind of few years behind, or few months, because now things are moving with lightning speed, behind the bleeding edge. So that's there. While 3D is a mature technology, so it's all across the platforms, kind of standards and everything that already exists, and is quite dependable nowadays. While back in the day, you didn't know if you were going to lose all your project if you start 3ds Max and it just crashes in the middle of everything. That those things used to happen back in the day. So in that sense, and I'm afraid that this just requires time for the technology to mature, for patterns to evolve. I don't know how fast this will happen, because everything is so much faster now. Like, history is much faster than it used to be. So
I would love to ask about the context for like how I read your presentations. It's a lot about like the barriers that someone has to overcome to really deliver good outputs and like usable outputs, and I completely agree with that. But I think you put some of the other, I mean, issues aside where the audience acceptance also still needs time to evolve, right? So we, for example, we recently did a game update where the art looked very different to the usual art, and it was on purpose. And our audience enraged over this difference because they thought it's AI generated, where in fact it was we collaborated with niche artists who kind of added their flavor to a feature that we had. And we actually then had a PR campaign afterwards where we spoke to these artists, where we interviewed them. And so the rage turned into actual like player love, where they were like, oh no, they're doing the opposite of what the rest of the companies are doing. They actually still work with the craft itself, with real artists. And I think that while we still have the intention to use tools where they should be used and want to get faster, we also have to be mindful that the acceptance with at least some audiences is not there yet, and give them a bit time to get used to this new normal, this new standard, that it's part of the process, so as other tools that we used in the past, right? So there was a similar rage when everyone had to move to Photoshop. So it's part of the process, but I think we shouldn't neglect that. Yeah, the ones who use our products or play our games are very important in the equation as well.
Yes, absolutely. That's absolutely true. And I think that we need to be forward when talking about this stuff. That just explain this up in advance, and even explain the use of AI. Like, what are we using and why? And who is using it, that it's not somebody just hacking things together. You're also kind of, that's a bit of a zeitgeist now. We are currently in very anti-technological stage in society. So everything from the rental scooters to AI gets scrutinized to no end, and it's probably also generational thing, because one of the most avid users of kind of AI for the memes, for the simplest stuff is my aunt. So she's in 70s, and she doesn't care. She cares only about the expression and what that allows you to do. On the other end of spectrum, on the other end of age spectrum, my son, who is just entering teens, he's like 12, 13. He's also totally happy with the AI. He identifies it immediately and laughs about it. But generation in the middle has this strong response that is kind of sometimes negative. And also, most of exposure that most of people get with the AI generated art is pretty crude examples that they see on social media. So direct raw output of the typical models, maybe even outdated models. But I'm totally certain that with just enough of tweaking with the tools that you already have, you can get it to a level that's for most of people unrecognizable as AI, and they would just not accept it on that. The raw output of the publicly available tools, people instantly recognize them, because another remarkable thing is how fast we were able as humans to start detecting AI art. Because when it appeared 2 years ago, everybody was thinking, oh, now everybody's going to fake political news with this thing and manipulate the public. That didn't happen at all, because humans are really, really able to adapt and discern new technology. But then on the other hand, we can always play with the output of AI tools to a way that it actually is still a creative element and not just kind of like first thing that comes out of the pipeline, which is also what I feel very important to do.
Thank you so much, Stanislav. Thank you everyone for joining. Just making sure we end on time too. Have a great day and
Thank
night.
you for
Bye-bye.
inviting me, and thanks for the discussion. It was
Thank
really a
you.
pleasure.
Thank
It was a
you.
great talk.